Okay, hi everyone, welcome. Um, so I'm just going to get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Yunju Chang, Executive Director of Cinevolution Media Arts Society, and I will be your moderator for today's artist talk with Nancy Lee, Lee Nanping, and Kiran Bumber, Kirandeep Kaur Bumber. So in terms of access offerings for today, we do have two ASL interpreters who's going to be available throughout the event. During the talk, the ASL interpreters and the active speakers are going to be spotlighted along with any screen sharing that is happening. We also have automated closed captions, which can be enabled by pressing the CC button in the top, in this bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Cinevolution Media Arts Society and the Richmond Art Gallery are situated on the occupied, traditional, and ancestral territories of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples, including the Musqueam and other Coast Salish peoples. Because much of Digital Carnival is taking place online, we also wanted to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking and doing that we're currently engaged in. This talk and Digital Carnival as a whole is using equipment and high-speed internet technologies that are not available in many Indigenous communities. These technologies leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that are disproportionately affecting Indigenous peoples worldwide. We ask that you acknowledge that we are all sharing in this responsibility to reconsider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in relation to Indigenous communities in what is now known as Canada and also across the world. So for today's talk, I'm really delighted to welcome Nancy Lee and Kiran Bumber to share a little bit about Union, the featured artist exhibition for Digital Carnival Z, and also their solo gallery, their first solo gallery exhibition. This exhibition has been a true labor of love. I think we first started having conversations about this back in the fall of 2018, if so more than almost 2 years ago at this point. And the world has changed so much in that time. But what I think hasn't changed is how prescient this exhibition and the themes that it tackles continues to feel. So for those of you who don't know Nancy and Kiran, I'll just briefly introduce them and then I'll pass the stage to them to talk a little bit, to give us a virtual walkthrough of the exhibition, and then we'll enter discussion. So Nancy Lee is a Taiwanese-Canadian interdisciplinary media artist, curator, filmmaker, DJ, and cultural producer. Their work stimulates and enlivens space, making a provocative statement about how inescapably interconnected we are with our surroundings. This notion of staging is a constant in Nancy's work and underpins their projects from their early work as a filmmaker through their conception of live events and into the realms of XR, new media performance, and installation, where their art practices continue to coalesce and evolve. Nancy is a co-founder and co-producer of Current Symposium, an intersectional and multidisciplinary initiative featuring programming for and by women, non-binary artists, and artists of color. Kiran Bumber is an Indo-Canadian interdisciplinary media artist, composer, performer, and educator. Her practice considers the mediation of memory through emerging technologies and how the body reinscribes memory into the present. Her work results in constructing interactive installations and performances that examine movement, touch, and cultural memory. As a composer, Kiran's practice centers around multi-channel and spatial arrangements and how the choreography of sound can influence the listener's notion of space, time, and narrative. Kiran is a co-director of Intermediate, a media art educational festival focused on cultivating growth within Vancouver's media arts communities and empowering marginalized communities with access to workshops, artist talks, and collaborative opportunities. So welcome to you both, and thank you so much for doing this presentation today. So I'll hand over the stage now to Nancy and Kieran to talk a little bit about Union and to share their exhibition with us.
Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for the introductions.
Cool. So let's get our screen shared. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been such a wonderful experience since 2018, working with Cinevolution to, realize the project the way we see it today, because a lot has changed. And from the very beginning where the idea and the story came till the way it looks now, it was a immensely long process, but we're just very excited that we can continue nurturing this relationship with Cinevolution over the years as the world has changed so much. Great, so what you see, well, right here, right now, this image is an image of the entrance of the gallery space. This is, when you first walk into the gallery space, you will, there'll be two projections that are facing each other, and it is the 2-channel film that is in the space.
Yeah, and when you walk into the space, you'll see that all the walls are covered in the same material that you see in the film, which are these black plastic garbage bags. In the year 3000, the world is completely void of organic material, and so all that we have around us are like man-made materials such as plastic. And the screens are in dialogue with one another. So within the two screens, you see mine and Nancy's two characters and our relationship within the dystopian world and this new order world called Gaia, which is this new friendly tech corporation that emerges where they're inviting everyone who is living in this dystopic world to chip into the Gaia world, where you can connect with one another and experience pleasure and joy. And how you connect into Gaia is through a cyber neurological implant called the Gaia Seed. And in the film, you'll see this kind of round little plastic figure that is attached to our back. And from there, you're able to access the cyber world. And before you access the cyber world, you have to agree to give Gaia all your privacy and let Gaia harvest your memories. And so as Gaia harvests your memories, you're able to earn the currency to buy new memories.
We can play the first video now. This video is just an excerpt from what you would experience with a 2-channel film with the 2 different narratives of Kieran and my story on the 2 different sides. In the gallery space, the film is enclosed in a quadraphonic sound system. So you have you hear Kieran and I's voices coming from each different side of the screen.
In this world, the only memories that Gaia cannot access are your ancestral memories. And these memories are rooted in your body and encoded in your genes. And the way these memories are manifested or awakened is through ritual performance. So throughout this exhibition, Nancy and I are rediscovering our ancestral history through touch and through ritualistic performance, which is realized through our post-apocalyptic wedding ceremony.
So we just included some like BTS footage of us shooting the film and also recording the sound for the piece, just to show how the material that we use in the film is actually wrapped around all over the gallery space. We essentially brought the entire set into the gallery space so people could feel immersed in this world that we've created.
And here's some excerpts from the recording session with the music that was created for this exhibition. So the screens are in dialogue with one another, and what you'll see situated in the middle is a sculpture of Nancy and I embracing. And this is to represent the longing for touch and intimacy that one experiences in this year 3000. And it also symbolizes the resistance that Nancy and I become a part of in this world, because touch is forbidden. For us to embrace is us going against the Gaia state.
The sculpture is made in collaboration with sculptor Ian Nakamoto, and the sculpture has hand imprints in the skin. We really wanted to convey the sensation of touch through this piece, because with everything that has been happening with COVID, the scarcity of touch and the scarcity of presence, and not being able to really take up space in the gallery as performers as we had initially intended on. We wanted to perform in the gallery space, but because of COVID, now we had to think of other ways to put our presence in the space. And that's why we created a sculpture that is almost to life size of our physical being.
So these are 3 different light boxes that you'll see in the gallery, and they're throughout the space. And these are to represent the different propagandas that the Gaia state is perpetuating in the world and inviting you into the cyber world.
It was important to us to convey these posters in the Lightbox medium, because this is the medium that we're all used to seeing adverts in. Throughout these light boxes, we're able to kind of dive deeper into the conceptual elements through world building and through branding. So the light box on the most left, the yellow one, it says play, and it has a symbol in it that's like a circular symbol that stands for the symbol of the ARC. So ARC is the currency that is being used in the cyber world. When you log on to Gaia, you give away your privacy and you have your memories extracted in order for you to earn ARCs. And then you can use those ARCs to buy more memory and pleasurable experiences. As you see in the back, it says, play the memory game. Playing the memory game, these are slogans. We did a bunch of research, like reading like casinos and like kind of gambling websites and like platforms, and kind of figuring out like what kind of slogan we want for ARC, the monetary system in the cyber world.
And then the second light box, you'll see in this nice, bubbly, inviting, fun writing, it says, a deeper way to connect. You are never alone. And in the background, there's some pretty watercolors, almost like a waterfall, kind of a wave flowing down. And you can imagine that this propaganda poster came about when Gaia first started and they wanted folks to sign up and subscribe to it. And at the bottom, it gives you more information about why you should subscribe to the world, and that you will be immersed forever and be connected through the Gaia seed, which is the chip that goes onto your back.
And the third light box, which is a mostly blue light box with some yellow numbers. there's number 1, serotonin, number 2, dopamine, number 3, endorphins, and number 4, oxytocin. So this light box showcases the 4 pillars of Gaia. And these are the 4 pillars that you can, it's kind of, we took a lot of language from like multi-level marketing organizations, and we took a lot of language from self-development organizations where they want you to join so you can, discover your full potential and pay a lot of money for it. So a lot of there's a lot of small texts that are also in this light box. That if you are in the gallery space, and you can kind of look really closely into it and read some of the text of the market of the Gaia world. The 4 different levels essentially is the 4 different happy hormones that we experience as humans. And these are the 4 hormones that essentially it makes up your happy experiences that you purchase in the Gaia world with your arcs. So as you gain more arcs, you get to access the better and better hormones. As the last hormone, oxytocin, that's the love hormone. So that's like the most, intimate and pleasurable hormone that you can experience. So as you level up in the Gaia world, the more you'll be able to access this love hormone and feel a sense of intimacy and connection.
Yeah, and the next space is we have the wedding dresses displayed that you'll also see in the film. And the wedding dresses are really important to us because they were the impetus of the whole project. Back in 2018, when Nancy and I were first talking about a new project and conceptualizing what union was, it really came about when we had this desire to wear a really intricate, beautiful, traditional wedding gown. I wanted to be draped in a traditional Sikh Punjabi wedding gown, and Nancy wanted to be draped in a traditional Han Chinese wedding gown. And then we started interrogating why we had that desire. And we realized that we were feeding into this wedding industrial complex where we just wanted to wear a wedding gown just for the sake of wearing something expensive and to take photos in, only to store it away afterwards. Much like what happens today in weddings, where it's not really about the spiritual union between 2 people. It's really about doing it for other reasons, like your family or like displaying your wealth, and also for social media. And when we were first conceptualizing this project, we talked about like how we wanted to create something intercultural that is truly respectful of both of our cultures. And we consulted with elders, and we consulted with older artists in our communities. And one thing that really stuck with us is, we had an elder that said to us, why respect the culture when, as women, the culture doesn't respect you, or can lead to non-respect, in a sense where when we talk about like being women and the policing of women's bodies and like being sold off or traded through marriage, because it is really, it has evolved from becoming a transaction between 2 families. And that kind of alleviated a lot of tension that we had towards wanting to be as respectful as we could to our cultures. And so we collaborated with a friend of ours, Adam Lin Bungan, who goes by Not Dead Yet, to imagine what these wedding gowns would look like in year 3000. So we took aspects of our ancestral heritage. So you'll see in Nancy's wedding gown, the paneling and the sleeves reference Han Chinese traditional wedding wear. And then my wedding gown references Indian traditional wear, where you have like two pieces, a top and a bottom, representing a lehenga. And the whole, the reason why we wanted to do this project is to have an understanding and to show that, you know, culture is not a static set of rules. It is informed by the past, but it doesn't make it culture unless it's performed in the present. So unless you are performing a wedding in the present, it doesn't constitute as something traditional. And therefore, by you performing it, you are also reinscribing what that performance is, and therefore changing the cultural memory and the cultural performance of that ritual.
These two dresses are made out of, it's a very shiny material. Most of the dress is a metallic red, and this material is, it's latex on vinyl. And that was a really important process for Adam, not dead yet, to conceptualize what kind of materials would be able to access in year 3000 based on this like apocalyptic setting that we've set in place. So plastic was one of the main materials that we had access to. And the dress that I wear is more bottom heavy. It's an off-shoulder dress, and it's got big, long sleeves that drapes to the ground, and a red paneling that's in the front that kind of references some of the more traditional Han dresses. And with Kieran's dress, it is more top-heavy because Adam wanted to kind of create a piece that was in dialogue with each other, that would complement each other in the space. So her top part has two long sleeves. Her shoulders are designed in a very sharp and pointy way that, you know, almost creates like an armor for her to wear. And her bottom part of her dress has three red thinner paneling that kind of comes down throughout.
So the last section of the exhibition is situated in Gallery 3, which is this octagonal room. And what you will see in this room is a 16-channel, so you'll have 16 speakers all around you, and a floor projection that's 18 by 18 wide. And the idea behind this installation, so you can walk inside this projection onto the floor and have the sound diffused all around you, in order for you to get an idea and be inhabited into the world of Union. And we're also using motion tracking to track where users are or audience members are in space. And then from there, we're able to change projection, have projection change all around, and have sound follow you in the space.
Yeah, the idea of having this space as like the last gallery space and having it as a kind of participatory experience is that we wanted to bring the audience into the Richmond Art Gallery, and we want folks to be able to experience Kieran and my like narrative first within the 2-channel film, and kind of, you know, get to know the world a little bit better through the film, through our individual stories in dialogue with each other, and through the different light box panels and our sculpture presence. And then after that, after we've primed them with all of this information of the world, then we bring them into this much more immersive experience. So the audience members can now participate and be a member in the dystopian and in the cyber world Gaia, and also be a witness of our Union ritual.
Yeah, so you'll see the same, some of the same imagery and symbolism being projected as well.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of our general brief walkthrough of the exhibition, but I know Yunro has prepared some more questions, so we can kind of go more in depth into some of the elements of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that walkthrough of the exhibition. I feel like every time I see it, and every time I hear you speak about it, the project gains, there's always more to learn, right? There's always more detail. There's so much that has gone into the world building, but also the care with which each work has been crafted in collaboration with different collaborators. Um, so, I mean, I think one of the things that has, like I said at the beginning, one of the things that continues to strike me about Union, and one of the first things that people will point out, when we start to tell them about the exhibition, is just how incredibly timely it is. And in many ways, the exhibition seems to have predicted our current moment, even as it is anticipating the distant future. Um, and you spoke a little bit as well about you spoke a little bit already about the impetus behind the show and your relationship to the wedding dresses, but I'm wondering about, just what do you think are the experiences that you've had, individually as artists, but also as people that sort of gave rise to a project like this, even before the moment when you were talking about wedding dresses. What are some of your lived experiences, or what are some of the kind of, in terms of the trajectory of your artistic practice, that maybe made Union like the project of the moment?
A big part of my practice is, we are performers. Like, we wanted this like nice wedding dress to wear to perform in, um, but I think, beyond that, it's just also wanting to create something create a piece that has a lot of different detailed elements that kind of bring everything together. Because Kieran and I, our practice is like, I'm more in a visual realm, and Kieran kind of works more in the audio realm. And, being able to work in these two complementary terms allows us to world build in a lot of different ways. And I think this project, kind of helped us, or gave us an opportunity to be able to experiment with new mediums, with new emerging technologies that we've never used before. And it allowed us to collaborate with a lot of amazing collaborators on this project that, we've always wanted to work with, but, did not have the time or did not have the resources to kind of do like a more deep dive into this like deeper relationship building with our collaborators. And another part is just like, I think, being like a queer Taiwanese person, like, I wanted to create something that, made it so other people feel like this, despite the dystopian future, like despite all this dystopia that we currently live in, I want people to feel like they are able to be the protagonist of their own narrative. That, as like a queer Taiwanese femme or queer Asian femme, you get to, conceptualize your own traditional wedding, because like that's something that is not very accessible to any of us.
Yeah, I think, expanding on our practices, Nancy and I have spent some time working in immersive environments, whether that be through like XR and performance. And in a way, the pandemic really assisted in making us more isolated and forcing us to focus on one project, which was this one. And we were able to deeper dive into world building that we haven't done before. I mean, the types of exercises that we were doing and the type of mentorship that we had was incredible. And it really deepened all the subjectivity within the world.
Mhm, mhm. Can you say a bit more about that? Just that deeper dive into the world building process, because I know that is such a big part of this work. Probably, I don't know, like maybe 80%, I think, of that work was front loaded, right? In conceptualizing every little detail from what the acronyms are going to be, to what the symbols are going to look like, the color choices, everything is so deliberate. Can you tell us a bit more about that process?
Yeah, we we watched a lot of films.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of films and we listened a lot. And from there, I think, we took a lot of inspiration from the media that we were consuming, and then took ideas that we liked and then had brainstorming sessions where we literally took pieces of paper and then like wrote in bubbles like, okay, dystopia, like what's in the dystopian world, and then cyber world, and then union, and then we're finding connections between the two. So we actually have a lot of like rough draft paper with all of our concepts on there. And then from there, that's when we kind of had more of a grasp of what the worlds were and what their relationships were with one another. That's when we brought in collaborators as well to further develop, the graphics of Gaia and whatnot, and the interaction design and so forth, and the film as well.
Yeah, I was also taking like an online screenwriting course during the kind of development of the project. And, I've never gone to film school or just art school at all. So that really kind of informed me as well, too, just understanding how to create dramatic tension and how to like position and create characters that or objects or things in a story that had like antagonistic kind of forces. So that really kind of informed us in terms of the creating how many worlds that exist within this entire like union world, and how the different worlds like overlapped. And then we brainstormed that through like Venn diagrams, like thinking about like sensorial experiences of each world, the smell, the touch, the color, the taste, and the emotional kind of sensation, and using that to map out. So we had a very clear distinction between each of the worlds. Essentially, each of the world has very specific kind of like aesthetic like framework for it, and then just sticking to that and then using that framework for us to work with a friend of ours, Venom S Studios. They did a lot of the graphic design work for us. So the graphic design work, we spent like 11 weeks working on the different iterations of it. So picking the direction of what we wanted to do for the graphics and using that as an opportunity to help us further our visual world building, and then taking the visual world building and implementing it into the film, and using the world building to also visual world building informing some of the elements of the sonic world, and vice versa, because all the parts were kind of in development together. So Kieran would send us some of the tracks for the world that she's made, and then we would listen to it, and then we use that to kind of develop like, what kind of textures that we would want for the world, and then it would kind of go back and forth as we kind of both develop visually and sonically.
Wow. That sounds like, yeah, it's incredible, right? Like there's so much work that has gone into every stage of the process, and my mind is just going in all these different directions. I have tons of questions, and I'm sure the audience does too. Sammy just pointed us to a video excerpt of the interactive video installation, and I know Victoria has a question as well about the technology that's being used for the motion tracking. So maybe, is this a good time to share maybe that Gallery 3 video clip of what the interaction looks like? Okay.
Yeah, so unfortunately you won't be able to hear the sound very well. So this, the interaction and projection design was in collaboration with Sammy Chen from Chimeric. And we're using blob tracking technology. So essentially, we have the projection coming from above and a RealSense camera that is detecting depth in the space. And so what we're able to do with that is know where your coordinates are in space and use that information to change the projection and also to alter the sound world. So right now, this section is the dystopian world. So people that are on the projection, they get a sense of being surveilled. So your coordinates are being shown in the space. And then you see this pulsing circle around you and lines appearing, showing your relationship with one another in the space. Because in this dystopian world, it's forbidden to touch. It was important for us to represent what surveillance would look like. And as mentioned before, the audio system, we built a custom audio system in collaboration with Alexander Zekovich that allows us to position sound in a 3D space. And using an audio format called ambisonics. And ambisonics allows you to hear sound the way you would hear it in real life. So it uses psychoacoustic properties to change sound depending on where you are in the space. So this is the second movement. So this is when you get invited into the world of Gaia. So you'll hear the voice of Gaia inviting you with the introducing the 4 different pillars and how you earn arcs. And the voice of Gaia is actually programmed to come from above. So we created this like virtual speaker in space. So when you stand in the middle, you get this sensation that she's coming from above, kind of like a voice of God. And here the interactors are playing the memory game. So this is when Gaia is asking you these questions and extracting your memory, and you're gaining points after she asks a question. And this last movement is the spiritual union. So this is where Nancy and I, you become a witness to Nancy and I's characters' union for each other. And when I was conceptualizing the sound world, I consulted with an ethnomusicologist, Connor Singh Vanderbeek, about Chinese, traditional Chinese and Indian music. We started talking about the traditional instrument guqing, which is a string instrument, Chinese string instrument. And there's 3 different ways of playing the guqing, or 3 different idioms. And they're called people, earth, and the heavens. So people is when you pluck the strings. Earth is when you slide on the strings. And then heavens is when you play harmonics on the strings. And I use that framework, those 3 descriptors, as mapping onto the 3 different worlds of union. So the dystopian world represents the earth. So you'll hear more sliding sounds. And the cyber world represents the people. So you'll hear more pluck sounds. And then in this union world, this represents the heavens. So you'll hear more harmonics in this world.
And with the lyrics of that we wrote for this sacred ritual of Kieran and mine, we use the process of dance writing, which is informed by our choreography teacher and consultant, Emelina Fredrickson. So, Kieran had some like ideas for the music, some just like rough sketches. So we would listen to that and we would do some improvisational like dance to it for like maybe 5 or 6 minutes. And then we would use that time when our bodies have become activated to do some like another 5 more minutes of free writing. So then we would take our text from free writing, for example, like 2 words like trembling harmony from Kieran and I, and we use that, put that into a phrase, and then we would then dance again to that. So then we would do that many times as we created more text and more movement. And then we took all the text and we kind of placed them together to make lyrical content for this song. And then we translated into our respective languages, Punjabi and Mandarin Chinese. And then that's how we formulated the lyrics for this portion. It was important for us to, activate our bodies, because this whole entire project is about, cultural memories that's stored in the body. So throughout this process, it was important that the words that were coming out of us was authentic to our true lived experiences.
And we also studied, Nancy sent me some Buddhist folk chants that were really important to her. And I also studied traditional Punjabi folk music as well, to frame the melodies of our two verses, and the moment where we also sing together at the end. But yeah, that whole experience, definitely, if you can, come out to the gallery. It's super immersive. So hope you all can make it out.
Yeah, we're being very safe with the COVID measures. I know the Richmond Art Gallery and the staff there have been really diligent about making sure that we're following all the public health advisories. So, you will be safe when you come. And yeah, oh, we have a really extensive comment. So I'm just going to try to read it. Here. Okay, I'm guessing this is probably a question from Tyler, who says, "Thank you for this brilliant and carefully descriptive talk. I was privileged to work with the artist in the final stages of installation. The deliberateness of each aesthetic decision and the detailed attention paid to the sensorial experience was really impressive. But what was perhaps most impressive was the capacity to engage so many collaborators. It seemed to mimic the organizational architecture of filmmaking, a deviation from standard visual art practice." I know this question is a little nerdy, but could you speak to your vision of the position of such collaborative art practice in our society, and questions of authorship, funding, audience engagement, and archive? Thanks for such amazing work.
Well, I think the most important part of like this collaborative kind of project, if you look at our credit list on our website, or even if you come to the gallery space, like the didactic video in the front, where there's like the text for the story and everything, like it was super important for us to make sure that our collaborators are shown in the gallery space, because like it's just like we do not want to be the kind of gallery artist that kind of takes credit for the work that we're not actually physically making, or that is not entirely our work. And with a project like this, it takes like 20 plus people to make it possible. So that's something like I think even within our own kind of like decolonial journey, it's important for us to make sure that people are credited properly, and that we want people to be able to feel a sense of ownership over the work as well. Like, because I know traditionally in gallery spaces, you have art fabricators, you have artists that don't actually touch or even fabricate any of their own works. And that's kind of like something that's acceptable and normal. And that's something that we want to challenge, because we don't think that is acceptable. We think anyone, even coming from a labor standpoint, anyone that puts in any hours of work making the pieces should be credited, should be on the didactics, should be in the film, should be on the websites. And that's just like a future that we hope that all artistic institutions and gallery spaces will adopt moving forward.
Yeah, and for the two of us, when we work on these projects, for Nancy and I, it's the end product. It's wonderful to have an end product and land somewhere where you feel like you've gained so much and have completed something that you've been wanting to do. But for us, it's about the process. It's about the relationships that we build with our collaborators, and it's about our learning from one another, and learning new skill sets, especially working with immersive and interactive technologies.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, well, Victoria Gibson says, thank you for your attitude about crediting the technicians. And I think so many of us who work in the field have the experience of, working on a project, and then the project goes live and everybody celebrates, and, your labor is kind of forgotten, right?
Mhm.
And so it really is. It's really refreshing, and I think really inspiring, to see a different standard being set, and also this kind of relational approach, even as you were speaking, doing the walkthrough of the different pieces in the gallery, you were introducing some of your different creative collaborators. Um, I'm hoping you can talk maybe a little bit about a bit more, maybe about sort of the collaborative process behind the project. And Pia also has a question here that might be relevant, which is also about the activism embedded in your art. So I'll leave it to you which of those questions you want to address in a combination.
Okay, process first, right? So when Kieran and I, we work, like we've done other projects that kind of had like a big team as well. And I think, we do have our respective fields that we work in. So it's like, I direct kind of the visual realm, and then it's not totally split, but like Kieran, does a lot of direction with like the audio team. So we do kind of set up like a way that we operate in terms of like who delegating our like supervision or like responsibilities, and who we're kind of keeping, like to hold each other accountable for the work that we do. And then like for example, depending on the collaborator, like working on the wedding dress with Adam, or like working on the sculpture with Ian, and like doing the like audio system design with like Alex, like our process is like, I think at the end of the day is like, we want this to be a fun process for everybody too, right? This entire project is like a learning process for all of us, because like none of us have ever done anything like this. So I think the most important thing is that every one of our collaborators is able to get something and gain something through this experience. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's great that we have like a dope show right now, and like that's all great, but at the end of the day, what's most important to us is that now we've had this opportunity to like really deepen our artistic relationships with our collaborators, and that is the most valuable thing for us moving forward.
Yeah, and especially during a time right now where, when we were working with our collaborators, most of us didn't have any other projects going on too. So we were able to create a space where our friends and collaborators could use their craft for this exhibition.
Absolutely. And I just want to maybe to start to invite people to put their questions in the chat. So if there's anything you want to ask about, I've been asking lots of questions and reading out some of the comments, but if there's anything you want to hear Nancy and Kieran talk about, please don't be shy. And then meanwhile, I want to kind of loop back to Pia's question about the activism embedded in your art. And yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Pia Massey is one of our artistic and film mentors that has helped us a lot with this project, kind of just like guiding us conceptually. And like I think as like diasporic Asian artists, like working in like a contemporary art realm, is like every move you make is a form of activism. Just to take up space, in these institutions is a form of activism, because it's not something, it's like, unfortunately, it's just not, our society is not at a place where like, people of color are, fully embraced by these institutions in a non-tokenistic way. So, like, I think for us, like being in here, like doing the work that we do, it's not easy. There's a lot of institutional resistance that kind of come with it. And there's a lot of uncomfortable feelings that kind of come about, doing the work that we do. And I think it's just being able to like survive it and to be able to like persevere like through it, to have something to show. It kind of offers this opportunity that we now pave the way where, and setting like a bar for what is possible for like the new generation to come. Because then they could be like, well, if Nancy and Kieran can do this in a gallery space, like why can't we do it?
Yeah, and I think like something that kind of kept coming up for me as well, as far insofar as being a role model in some ways, or like modeling what's possible. I also heard that in how you were speaking about the project as a learning process for you and your collaborators, but also for you yourself to develop sort of new skills in working with new technologies, like new ways of working. And of course, that's related, I think, as well to your individual work with current and with intermediate. Yeah, which is just really, really inspiring. And so thank you for the work that you do. Yeah, so Victoria says, it's not just people of color, but also that you're women, which is really inspiring. I'll keep asking questions as we wait for the audience to chime in.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's really fascinating for me is kind of I think your as artists, you each work so much in live performance and live performance experiences and kind of creating these immersive environments. Um, how is that different? So the difference, so Nancy, for example, I know you do a lot of DJing, and Kieran, you do a lot of live work as well. So what is the difference, for you between sort of more like one-off events where you are constantly there, right? Kind of masterminding the entire environment, to creating a gallery experience, where the audience sort of comes in and has to make their own experience. Like, do you see that as being different?
It's quite different, I think. One is like the longest durational performance you'll ever do. And one is like, oh, the performance of like, it's like one night, and you do one thing and it's fleeting, right? Like this process, definitely, maybe in 10 years, this process will feel fleeting, but we're still in the thick of it right now. And it just feels, I think, the type of communication and the kind of the way the project is produced, exhibition, like this is our first exhibition. We've never done something like this before. And I think previously when we do our own live performances, like, or even our with our own projects, with like intermediate, with current and stuff like that, it's like, I think it's like, we're kind of like renegade artists that like we're used to being self-producers.
Yeah.
We're used to getting our own funding, used to being self-producers, used to getting our own space, negotiating our own contracts, and doing things that way.
And having our own agency.
So working within like an institution is like a really, really new experience for us. We had worked in like, we've done like Fuse and stuff like that, Vancouver Art Gallery. But again, that's like a one night event, maybe within preparation, that's like the duration of your relationship is like 1 month. So I think like, working within like an institutional kind of framework where the bureaucratic process of getting things done and the order of things and the communication kind of practices, that is like a extremely new experience for us. And it's definitely challenging like at times. And we hope that institutions can recognize that the way they are, I hope institutions can recognize that the way that they are structured is oftentimes like, it's not the best way that it can be. And that there are actually a lot more robust kind of ways that you can kind of implement or kind of showcase something that does not have to go through this process. And I think like, you know, as like artists that like want change in the future, you know, like we hope like, and this is not just artistic institutions, we're talking about like every kind of government institution, just institutions, period. Like, you know, we hope that, you know, there will be an opportunity where like we can kind of just like deconstruct these kinds of institutions, and hopefully we can like build a new world where like structures can actually be in place that that isn't just meant for its own self-preservation, but is actually in place that where every part of the process, whether you are on contract or not, or whether you're just in the space, can feel a sense of ownership in like building that organization up.
Yeah, so we hope that different organizations and institutions can be open for change, because, you know, yeah, like a lot of these have like long histories and are about self-preservation. And just going back to, you know, being a performance, even if we're not producing our own performances, you know, if we get hired to do a performance, it's like you're getting hired to do as your act, right? Like Kieran Bumber performing or Nancy Lee performing. And with the gallery exhibition, and because it hadn't been realized previously, it felt like things had to be in constant negotiation with the gallery space on like what the exhibition would actually look like, which was a challenge for us.
Yeah. And we just hope that like, you know, like we hope that like the what curators or what the curatorial means generally. I mean, I know that has been like evolving a lot over the years, and I hope that, you know, that just evolves quicker, you know, in a way that like, you know, curators, you know, at least the kind of curators that we would like to be, you know, we want to be people that support the artists, that like kind of allows complete artistic freedom. And I know that's traditionally not really what curators do. You know, curators do have a lot more control over how works are presented. And we just hope that, you know, by us doing this project and doing Union, you know, we get to challenge, you know, kind of like what the status quo has been, you know, within arts institutions.
Yeah, and you know, I think Union challenges the status quo um, in more ways than one, right? I think, you know, in terms of, yeah, I think in terms of the form of the artwork itself, in terms of, I think, the content, and as you're speaking to now, like also like the process of art making, you know, what that can look like. Um, yeah, so I have a question here from Ying Wang, who says, you know, continuing on the foundation that Union has built, what is your vision and your plan for future projects?
Ooh. But it still feels like we're in the thick of Union. But we do want to tour this project, especially in our respective countries. I mean, once COVID permitting, we do want to go to India and we do want to go to Taiwan. Because we do feel, you know, Nancy and I have shown work in Asia before, and we do find that the audience is so different, and the reception there is so different for media or media art exhibitions. And so we'd love to see what the reception is and have conversations with people over there on how relevant this project is to them too, as folks living in our home countries receiving the work.
And like, I think for us, like future wise too, like not just for union, but is to further engage in like making new works where, you know, we're decentering the white gaze in like a contemporary art context, right? Like we don't want to be the token Asian artists like in a white institution, you know, like we want to make art and make work for people that look like us, that have lived experiences like us, and that can relate to us on like a very like personal and spiritual level. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done just generally, just not by us, but like as society as a whole. And that's something that we want to continue participating in and championing.
And we also want to continue working with Cinevolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'd love to continue working with you. I know we were talking about how since I'm here in Taiwan right now, like it's a really great opportunity to connect with some of the local organizations about hosting opportunities. Although, of course, right now COVID is ramping up here, so we're actually in semi-lockdown. So we shall see, but I think it's holding on to that hopefulness, right, about what is possible and what can happen. Because I think I just like the last year or two like just has been such a roller coaster ride in so many ways. It feels like we're kind of in this moment of reckoning between just amidst like just Black Lives Matter, and like the murder of George Floyd to, the most recent, the killings in Atlanta, which really, I don't know. I feel like, like heartbreaking and like, it doesn't begin to describe it, right? And I'm wondering too, like for you, sort of from when you were conceptualizing the project in 2018 and kind of like working through all of these just world events right since then, not just COVID, but also just the political and social upheavals that have happened. How has your thinking or your approach to the project or to your own art practice evolved maybe only that time over that period of time?
I mean, I feel like I've always like for both of us, we've always kind of, been in the kind of like, we've always wanted to make work for people that can relate to us and connect to us. But I feel like, with everything that has happened in the last like year and stuff and things that are happening right now still, I mean, the thing is like, with all the stuff that we see in the news, it's like as someone living in a racialized body, it's actually not that surprising to see all that stuff happening in the news. So because it's always been happening, these racist experiences have always been happening. We've just always experienced it, but now it's just being played on the news and getting more like media attention. So like it hasn't changed anything about what we've always wanted to do, but it just it gave us more courage to be able to be more outspoken and to ask for what we really deserve. And I think if anything, like anything that happened in the last year or so, it just made it that we just don't want to take as much shit anymore.
Yeah, and also too, there's also like this pressure of like with all of these world events or racialized events that have been happening is to like create trauma art as well, which we've been seeing like in galleries too, and that's not something that Nancy and I want to do, because it's not, that type of art is again for the white gaze to consume the pain of racialized bodies. And so it pushed us even more to create space and to carve space for us to be in this exhibition or create this exhibition.
Yeah, we want to be able to create a future where people like us can like happily like thrive in and to like get married and to like perform rituals, like contemporary art from
that celebrates our cultures.
That celebrates us instead of like reflecting on the painful past that we all have lived and it's all stored in our body already. Like, I don't want to look back on that. I want to look at the future that we could possibly all live in.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So I've got a question here from Ying, and I want to respond to that, but there's just a lot, so I'm going to take a moment and ask Ying's question. So Ying says, part of the process for you is also to explore the root of your own cultures. How have your perspectives of your own traditions been evolved after the process?
I mean, like, I think we kind of talked about it, like when we talked about the wedding dress, like at first we wanted to like do something traditional, like, what does that even mean? What does tradition even mean, right? Like, is tradition something that you can like buy at a store that is supposed to be from 300 years ago? Or is like tradition, what you do every day and what you perform in the present in reaction to what the present moment is giving you, right? So I think our understanding of our own desires for tradition, as like diasporic community members is like, oh, like we wanted something, we wanted to get this like fancy wedding, this fancy fat Asian wedding that we wanted to do, and then we realize like how much we are being influenced by the wedding industrial complex, by capitalism, and how much of our desires, we don't even own our own desires. Our desires are being shaped by the media, by capitalism, by all these other things. And like this project kind of allowed us to take ownership and really interrogate where our desires actually come from, and gave us space to kind of imagine like what we would actually want now that we have some awareness of like how our desires are shaped. And I think with being like, being Asian, being like a migrant here is like, you kind of have a longing for your culture in like a way that, and I think a lot of, Asian folks here too, it's like, you want to like overperform your culture in some ways because you feel so far away from it. But consuming and overperforming your culture doesn't necessarily like make it more of your culture. Like you don't actually have to do that. You can actually like create your own rituals and create your kind of like cultural traditions, like as like, diaspora, like, I speak Mandarin with a funny accent. I know that. And, that's chill. Like, but it doesn't make me any less Taiwanese.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is like, throughout my my artistic journey the past few years is like realizing like it doesn't matter, like I'm not fluent in Punjabi, I can't read Punjabi, but it is my ancestral tradition, like it's all lived experiences in my body, and that gives me the right to reify and to perform in a way that makes me feel grounded in my culture. And I think Union has given the space for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think for me, like what is most powerful about this exhibition is that sense of hopefulness and that sense of, agency and, empowerment of the individual to really stake out or to carve out a space for themselves within their culture where, every gesture, every, iteration can be a full participation in the culture and can have the and that it's not only that they are able to take ownership of the culture itself, but that they can influence what the culture becomes. And I think that is just such an important message. I think so many of us who are diasporic subjects really struggle with that. And I know too, like, in terms of, intergenerational or familial dynamics, like that's often very, very challenging, especially for younger generations, right? Who I think there is this longing to reconcile with your family and your culture. But whenever there is a disconnect, it's kind of like, that's the Western influence in you speaking.
And it's like I was gonna say, but like every generation has had other influences too, right? Like every generation has had different socioeconomic like factors, like other political influences. You know what I mean? That it's like it's never like there's never been a time where something's been like the purest and it's been like this is tradition. It's like it's been evolving with every generation. So I think it's also like having elders realize that it's like it is malleable.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just, even that, like and it comes down to, I think in some ways, like this attitude of openness, right? And like to things that are quote unquote other, right? And like sort of being open to other interpretations or readings or performances of identity, right? And it's not just culture, but also, I mean, Nancy, we've had lots of conversations about queerness as well, and like how queer identity is understood. So yeah, I feel like this work just operates on so many different levels to, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's like it's still 6 a.m. so my brain is not totally firing. But but to unravel, to unravel, and I think to kind of reimagine the possibilities that are open to us all, not just as people of color, not just as women, but just I think as humans, living yeah, like on this astral plane or whatever. So I'm just going to check to see if anybody has any questions, because we're at, yeah, we're starting to go over our allotted time. So I want to see if anybody in the audience wants to raise any questions and add to the discussion. He has actually been popping lots of little gems in in the chat, so I'll make sure that we pass that along to Nancy and Kieran. They're a little far away to be able to read everything that's being said
I know, I'm
right
like
now. So if
squinting
they're
right
not,
now.
yeah, if they're not responding right away, that's why. um, yeah, Sammy says, Nancy, that your Taichung accent
Oh,
is actually really badass and trendy.
nice.
Yeah, so if there aren't any questions, maybe we will start winding down. Do the two of you have any final words? Anything that I haven't asked about that you really want to just get out there while we're all here?
Um, at the end of the day, we just want people to feel like they have agency to change the current we want people to have agency to feel like they can change the current conditions that we live in, and that they can participate and be an active cultural producer in producing a culture that we all want to live in the future. And like with Kieran, me and Kieran's like collaboration over the years is also important for us to set an example so people know that like within like our diasporic and migrant communities, it's kind of siloed in some ways too, right? Like we want to show that we can have lots of intercultural solidarity with each other, because that's just so important at the end of the day, to kind of like see past like our cultural differences as well too, and that we are stronger together.
Yeah. Here. Yeah, and so thank you, yeah, so much, Nancy and Kieran, for the lovely, lovely talk and conversation. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for being so engaged, all of your wonderful comments and thoughts. Looking forward to revisiting them after this. Like I said, this conversation is being recorded, and so it will be made available from June 5th onwards, so you can watch it again. And also I want to thank the Richmond Art Gallery, of course, for hosting this talk, and for hosting the exhibition, and for being a partner with us during this year-long journey. So thank you as well to the interpreters. Yes, thank you, Ying, Larissa, and Jillian, who've been working really hard to kind of keep the conversation going. And I think Victoria commented earlier that the ASL is just so much better than the auto captions. So no out of the can solutions for us, I think. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.